On Larry King Now, 3D printers, fleeting tech fad or revolution in the making.
It's taking virtual objects and being able to produce those in atoms, real physical materials. It's been being used in industry for a long time, and now it's becoming personal, right down to the home.
One of the really strong growth areas for 3D printing today is in the medical field.
Researchers in Princeton have just printed a bionic ear that is 1,000,000 times more sensitive than the human ear. The first major fully functional organ, the liver, is expected to be coming within the year.
Will 3D printers make guns accessible to everybody?
I thought we could disintermediate the authorities which claim monopoly powers over arms. And I thought that this could be done cheaply and easily, and I wanted to demonstrate that it could be done. And we did.
Plus,
if you take a look at around you, our reality today is formed by the things that are produced for us. Now, this technology allows you to make your reality, so your imagination is the future.
All next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. We are discussing today the burgeoning and fascinating field of 3D printing. It's a technology with an awe-inspiring range of uses, from churning out plastic Yoda heads to printing furniture and houses and food, and in the future, perhaps, even viable human organs. Here to discuss the far-reaching applications and implications of 3D printing, Aaron Walsh, Director of the Immersive Education Initiative, a professor at Boston College and an expert on 3D printing, and John Cobb, Executive Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Stratasys, one of the world's largest manufacturers of 3D printing equipment and material. We'll also be joined remotely by Mick Everling, who used a 3D printer to create prosthetic limbs, and by Cody Wilson, who infamously produced the world's first functional 3D printed gun. We'll hear from them later on. What's 3D printing?
Well, it's the conversion of bits into atoms. It's taking virtual objects, things that you might have in a video game or a virtual environment, and being able to produce those in atoms, real physical materials.
Who started this?
Well, it started early stages, back in the 1970s, but it really got kicked off in the 80s, in large part to the founder of Stratasys, John's company, some seminal patent work in that field. It's been growing, it's been being used in industry for a long time, and now it's becoming personal, right down to the home.
Some guys from a company called CoKreeate는, they came to my house, scanned me, and took pictures and created this. What is this?
That is you printed. That's a printed version of Larry King. It is what the process they went through is they scanned you, turned you into a three-dimensional virtual model.
This guy with a camera walking around, right?
Took
about 10 minutes.
Very quick, 3D scanning. And then they took that virtual model, those bits, those pixels, and they printed it layer by layer to create a physical model of you. So
how big is this range of printing devices?
Oh, it's huge. A couple $100 to get into it. Do-it-yourself kits. You can get do-it-yourself kits online, and you can make them yourself, or you can go up to $500,000 to $1 million industry level.
How aware is the public of all of this?
I think they're starting to get aware. Shows like yours starting to get the word out. I think it's at that, what I would call the tipping point or the inflection point for public awareness. The maker communities, the do-it-yourself communities are aware of it. Manufacturing is aware of it, but the average person, I think, is still unaware of what's possible.
What's bioprinting?
Organs, tissues. Some examples of that, liver tissue has been printed.
Now, wait a minute. You're going to print a human organ?
Yeah, I'm not going to do it.
You would take a healthy liver, print it, and put it into someone who has a bad liver.
That is the goal. Right now, the tissue samples, live tissue samples have been printed. You take human cells, and you can combine them with electronics even. You can print the tissue, and now they have the vascular network. Brigham and Women's Hospital, where my kids were born in Boston, has just announced that they're printing the vascular system to connect these organs together. The first major fully functional organ, the liver, is expected to be coming within the year.
John, what's your role in this?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be involved in 3D printing really from more or less the inception. I've been with the company for 20 years, and you know, at the beginning, really 3D printing was set up as a tool for the engineer and the designer, so really for prototyping. And then as recently as probably the last 5 years, we've really started to see 3D printing get involved in manufacturing. manufacturing jigs and fixtures, on the assembly floor, and then I guess kind of the nirvana, if you will, of 3D printing, which is printing of end-use parts. And there's more and more companies that are starting to do that at this point in time.
How many people is this going to put out of work?
I don't think any. It's what it does is, like so many technologies do that we've faced over the years, is it looks at a different type of skill set that is necessary in order to do the design work, in order to do the manufacturing work. It's different types of manufacturing versus what traditional manufacturing is today.
Do you two work together?
Not directly, no. We work with Stratasys in terms of placing some printers in our community, and we've just started talking about a strategic relationship. Stratasys is the 800-pound gorilla in this space.
Where is Stratasys based?
We have dual headquarters. One is in the Minneapolis area, and the other is in Israel, right outside of Tel Aviv.
And your company is?
It's a nonprofit consortium. It's global.
According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 18 people die every day waiting for an organ transplant. Could this be a move toward making that zero?
One of the really strong growth areas for 3D printing today is in the medical field. And when I say medical, we talked a little bit earlier about the organ transplants, but then also digital dentistry, as
digital dentistry, what will that do?
Well, if you look at the way the dentistry has worked in the past, there's a lot of molds and that type of thing that you have to go through in order to get a bridge or whatever else. Now all that is done through a scanning type of process, much the same as
you
your
make
scan.
a set of false teeth in 20 minutes.
Well, exactly, or a bridge or a cap or whatever else.
What is that?
This is something that is called a brain gear, and this was one of the benefits, I think, of 3D printing. Is you look at this particular product, which is quite complex. Obviously, it rotates, but this was built in one piece, all in one piece. So if you look at traditional manufacturing, the methodology that's used today, it would be impossible to do. But if you look at 3D printing, people look at it and go, how is this done?
What kind of equipment do you need for 3D?
It depends on what you want to do. This is a fairly entry-level piece of equipment.
This is the simplest form.
Yeah, and on the high end, talking about organs, researchers in Princeton have just printed a bionic ear that is 1 million times more sensitive than the human ear. So we talk about having the ability to help people with transplants. Not only can they potentially be saved, they can be improved. And that kind of printing is way up on the scale in terms of complexity and cost and expertise. It actually prints human tissue combined with electronics. So you've got a huge range in capabilities.
Coming up, Mick Ebeling will tell us how a 3D printer helped save a Sudanese boy's hands. We're talking about how 3D printing could revolutionize healthcare right after the break. Joining us now is Mick Ebeling. He's the founder and CEO of Not Impossible Labs. It's an international speaker on the subject of open source medical devices. Now tell me about this Sudan project and the boy you helped.
There's a young boy named Daniel who I met through reading an article about a Dr. Dom Katana who is in the Nuba Mountains, which is a contested area between North Sudan or Sudan and South Sudan. And this boy was out tending his family's flocks, and a bomb, the government of Sudan was bombing the area, and he had both of his arms blown off. And when I read the article about him having his arms blown off, I was really moved because I have 3 young boys, and I couldn't imagine that happening to them. And his response when he woke up after the amputation surgery was, if I could have died, I would have. And it was just something that I couldn't just close my computer and go to bed after reading that. I needed to do something. So we decided to put together a solution for him. 3D.
And you made him a hand?
We made him a 3D printed arm.
Now, part of I understand Not Impossible's vision is your solutions are open source, meaning other people can access it, right?
That's correct. Everything we do through this concept of help one, help many. So we help one person, but then we publish the code and the solution open source so that many people can use it afterwards.
I understand that there are 50,000 amputees in Sudan. Are other people starting to get into this? Are there more 3D printers being used?
Well, what we did is when we went over, we made an arm for Daniel to allow him to feed himself for the first time in 2 years. But then we also trained Dr. Tom's staff. There was about 8 young men that we trained to make arms as well.
Wow.
But when we left the 2 printers and the filament and the tools. And from the time I left to the time that we launched this on January 6th, we made a public announcement. They were making approximately an arm a week without us even in country, which to me, that was our goal. We didn't want to just go over and do a drop a bunch of stuff there and then leave. We wanted to make it so it could be an ongoing initiative.
Now, John, I understand you have a similar story about a girl named Emma.
Yes, Emma was born with a disease called AMC, which really allowed the inability of her to move her arms. So there's a product called Rex, and Rex was something that was manufactured for adults. But some doctors at DuPont Hospital looked at Emma and took the idea of Rex and a 3D printer that they had of ours, and they actually took that particular item and scaled it down for a young girl who is 4 years old. And for the first time, she was able to move her arms, interact with different objects. She was able to verbalize things and play with things for the first time.
This is amazing. Now, they make prosthetics all the time, right? In lab.
Exactly.
Is this going to be cheaper and faster?
Well, there's two things. It's definitely less expensive in a couple ways. One, you think about an adult. An adult really doesn't change too much other than losing weight or gaining weight. But for a young child, they're growing all the time. So the interesting thing about this is the mother is able then to say, okay, Emma's grown X amount, and then they'll print out a certain piece that conforms to whatever her growth is. The interesting thing about this is there's been a foundation set up, Emma's Magic Arms, at this point in time. There's been roughly about 70 children that have been helped by this.
Mick, are you using 3D printers in any other projects? Like a robot? You have a robot walker?
Yeah, we're working with 3D. 3D printing is basically rapid prototyping. So we use it as a way to test out our theories and how we're going to build something. But we're now looking to build an exoskeleton for a young girl with cerebral palsy in Mexico City.
Larry, one of the most important parts of this is the personalization of this technology to the individual, but in these cases, in the Sudan, it's getting the prosthetics there. If that child was unable to get to a hospital that could produce a prosthetic, end of the game. These types of printers can be shipped out, and they can be set up in small villages, and they can even be solar powered in some cases, so you can have a complete medical care situation there.
You see any ethical questions here, John?
You know, there's with any new technology, there's certainly
Defying God.
No, I think well, if you look at it, society has always been looking to help individuals, and I think what 3D printing has done is just one, brings it closer to the patient, and then I think the second thing is really start to customize to an individual patient's need, and I think that's truly amazing and game-changing.
Mick, how is Daniel doing now?
Daniel's doing great. He's. I just spoke to Dr. Tom a couple days ago. He's using the arm to continue to feed himself, which is kind of the primary reason we wanted to do it. And I think the thing that's great about what's going on over there is that if a finger breaks on an expensive prosthetic, you have to send it back to the supplier and the maker, and then there's shipping, and there's a finger breaks on an arm of ours or an arm that's generated from a 3D printer, and you just print that finger again, you know, and it's cost pennies because you're already set up and doing it. So that ability to make something that is, I mean, and our printers were printed off of solar power. The hospital was solar powered. So just creating that scalable solution that you're not going to have to go through the rigmarole of having to get permission to continue to do the work. That's to me what's the most exciting.
The future seems unlimited here, Aaron. Where's it going?
I think it's your imagination. You know, if you take a look at around you, our reality today is formed by the things that are produced for us. Now, this technology allows you to make your reality, so your imagination is the future.
Thank you very much, Mick. Up next, we're joined by Cody Wilson, who successfully made the first 3D printed gun. Now, we'll hear his story and talk about the implications of this technology after the break. This is scary. And we now welcome to this incredible show today Cody Wilson, the founder of Defense Distributed. It's a nonprofit, anti-monopolistic digital publisher. In 2013, Cody produced the first 3D printed gun and released the designs online for others to access. Why, Cody, did you do this?
Larry King, thank you. I think there are a number of reasons. Maybe the most foremost of these was a kind of suggestion about how we saw the digital future entailing or rolling out. And we thought that that meant a future of personal armament. In fact, we could prove it. So it was a kind of curious and intrepid way of creating the future that we imagined.
But why a gun? You call the gun the Liberator, but what is the social purpose of making a gun from a 3D machine?
I didn't define it first as social purpose. I defined it as political philosophy purpose. Basically, the idea is that I thought we could disintermediate the authorities which claim monopoly powers over arms, especially in the United States, but of course in the world. And I thought that this could be done cheaply and easily, and I wanted to demonstrate that it could be done, and we did.
But wait a minute. So you're saying to the arms industry, I can make guns cheaper than you, and I can do them faster, so we could kill a lot more people.
I think that that's not true, actually.
But what is the point?
The nature of this manufacturing techniques don't outstrip conventional mass manufacturing techniques and plastic processes, and are inferior to metal manufacturing techniques, metallurgy. But as a way of evading a certain regulatory technique or regulatory apparatus, this evaded background checks. This evaded certain kind of laws about how you're going to get access to AR-15 parts. I mean, it was like the silver bullet, if you will, for some of these gun laws at a specific time that America was debating the next round of gun regulation.
I get it. You put the design online for others to access. Is it true you downloaded more than 100,000 times in 2 days?
Yeah. And unlike big publishers, we didn't download those ourselves. People all over the world downloaded that gun very quickly. The news was pretty big.
Is it legal?
Strictly speaking, yes. It's legal to download in the United States, legal to make for yourself. The rest of the world, not so much. But yeah, we kind of got around the law.
But the State Department took down the design files, saying they violated federal laws about exporting munitions.
That's right. They're conducting an investigation to see whether that in fact happened. But the State Department's problem is not the guns themselves. The State Department's problem is the chain of authority related to the data. They think that actors have to ask for their permission before they release this kind of data into the internet. And of course, that's plagued with constitutional problems from the First to the Second Amendment. So this is not settled in the least.
You think everyone should have the ability to have a gun, make a gun?
Oh yeah. I think I've put my money where my mouth is on that as well.
You were originally going to print the gun on a Stratasys printer that you had leased. The company seized it. Why'd you do that, John?
Well, at the time, I think it was back in 2012, we looked at his intent to manufacture and distribute firearms, and that was a violation. Then there's also the plastic gun law that was in effect and actually went
You
into
don't
effect
like
as well.
what he's doing?
I wouldn't say I personally like or don't like it. I think the fact of the matter was that looking at the regulations that existed on the books at that particular time, utilizing the printer, it was a rented printer at that point in time. We felt as a company that it was the right thing to do to repossess it. And I think Cody, as I recall, sent the machine back as well.
Yeah.
What do you make of all
My
this?
position, just a couple points that are really important to point out about Cody's statement. He printed it on a less powerful printer. Printers are capable of fusing titanium alloys. They can be used and are used in turbine engines, jet engines, and rocket engines. So the notion that you can't 3D print something that's strong is not correct. The designs that he used and printed were on a less powerful printer. The concern, of course, whether it's plastic and can fire a gun or it's titanium can fire, doesn't really matter. It's an ethical issue that we have to deal with. These types of
Well, in all
technologies.
advances, there are
Exactly.
side effects,
That's
as they
exactly
say.
And I didn't mean to suggest that our printers or 3D printing itself was inferior to traditional techniques. Just the printers and the range of materials we had and the cost would have just been prohibitive to try to do things in titanium or metal powder. We were working in polymer.
Cody, what does your family think of all this?
Oh, I think they've been very much, at first bemused and then now entertained how everything has gone. And I think that they're grateful that I'm not in jail. But I want to say that it was actually pretty clear cut. I was a law student while I did much of this project. The law was not unambiguous for most of what we were doing. And that's, I considered, I don't have bad blood with Stratasys, but I considered some of what they were doing a bit kind of disingenuous, because the law is pretty clear that Americans can make, individuals can make guns without having licenses or without requiring licenses from the government.
You worry about this, John?
Well, sure. I think anybody that flies or is involved in society is worried about any type of weapon or firearm. Yes.
You ever regret what you're doing, Aaron?
I don't regret it. I question it regularly. Going back to when I first got involved with immersion in virtual reality, these are life-changing, culturally changing technologies, and so you have to question along the way. So I don't regret it. I think it's the good, by far, outpowers the negative, but I think you have to question as you go.
Yeah, do you ever doubt yourself, Cody?
No, I mean, I think that I do, right? I think that it's human to doubt yourself. And I don't think that I'm the cartoon radical that some people paint me to be, but I'd like to question these universal ethics to which we appeal that say, like, well, you shouldn't have a gun, you shouldn't allow people access to guns, but for the government. That seems to ring tinny and hollow, especially in the light of the revelations that people like Mr. Snowden have shared with us. Authority isn't to be blindly trusted at all costs universally.
Thank you very much, Cody. John and Aaron are answering your social media questions in our final segment. Plus, we'll take a look at a house being built entirely by a 3D printer. Stay with us.
So we're dus architects, and we're currently 3D printing a kennel house. The thing is, we were already printing with these smaller printers for a long time. But as architects, we were thinking, what would this actually mean for architecture? What if you really could 3D print buildings? We can really recycle waste materials into printable materials, eliminate large transport costs, really make unique and personalized architecture. You can print buildings and then just shredder them and then print them anew. And then we said, let's just do it.
We really see 3D printing as a new craft. The rooms are first tested on the small printers, and once the file is completely finalized, we send it to the big printer. Because the technique in the small printers is exactly the same as in the big one, we can use the same files. So the innovation is not only in the technique, but it's also in the design. So the rooms we build consist of elements in which we combine ornaments, structure, inner facade and outer facade in one.
We can change the design according to different parameters. And just imagine that you can print with solar panels, for instance, and suddenly you can really position the house so that it's oriented towards the sun, and your house really becomes one big power plant. We started printing with plastics because that's the material that works best with this FDM printing technique. We're currently developing a new bio-based 3D printing material that's really especially made for 3D printing architecture. That's both really sustainable, strong, and beautiful.
That was a video from Dus Architects. They're building a house constructed entirely by a 3D printer. Professor Koshavendisis of USC has a technology, he says, that's capable of printing an entire house in a day, complete with functioning plumbing and electricity. You're both nodding.
Yes,
Sure.
it's possible.
It's possible, yeah, without a doubt.
Well, where is all this going? Where is it going?
It's changing the world we live in.
I asked you before about jobs. Wouldn't this eliminate construction companies?
Well, again, I think, you know, there's so many different things that have happened over the course of history that have changed the way things are built, designed, and manufactured. And I think what it does is really it opens up a new opportunity for different types of manufacturing. You know, in the film industry, there's all sorts of things that are being done today to generate props and that type of thing, and a lot of them now are starting to be 3D printed. And you know, there's Legacy Effects is a company here in the Hollywood Hills area, and they'll talk about how their workers have had to be retrained to utilize 3D printing. So they haven't been displaced. As a matter of fact, I think if you talk to one of the people there, you'd find out that the workers are actually happier because they end up being much more creative because the machine is actually doing some of the production work for them.
This is large-scale printing. How accessible are 3D printers for the average consumer?
The average consumer can, for a couple of $100, have one on their desk within a matter of days.
We're going to see this. We're going to see it as ubiquitous as TVs and smartphones.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of content that's out there. People, I think, want to be creative. I think the 3D printing technology is an enabler that allows people to be creative. And you think about it in a larger scale, you start to look at the capability of inventory at large box stores. You know, you have a line maybe of 3D printers. So you're looking at a plumbing fixture or common fixture. you would actually maybe take a picture on your iPhone, you know, look at that joint that you're looking at, send that down to the big box store and go pick it up. And they don't have to have this huge amount of inventory that's sitting there.
We have some social media questions. Stephen Perry 80 via Twitter. Will 3D printing and cosmetic surgery ever go hand in hand?
Yes, they will. Absolutely. They're already being done in medical. Faces are being reconstructed with 3D printing. But the long-term view, the ethical concern is, what if I can 3D print my own face? What if I can preserve my face at 25 and then have it reapplied at 45? It's possible, technically. Ethically, I don't think, especially in LA, I don't think you have the question of whether or not we should augment.
Oh, but there's 33 suicides in Beverly Hills plastic surgeons. Okay, Zildo 221. What about using 3D printers for food? Is it capable of printing solid edibles?
Absolutely.
Palatable. Wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's being done
Take
today.
a picture, here's your pizza.
Would you like cheese and fries with that?
Everything's custom, I guess, right?
Can
Including food.
Can 3D printers self-regenerate?
Yes, they can. There's an entire line of open source 3D printers. They start with a parent printer, and they can print better versions of themselves, and they have entire family trees.
Give me both of your views 10 years from now.
Printed organs, fully functional, reduced manufacturing costs, people creating their home goods, and some of the big ethical issues we've been talking about today really surface and perhaps get regulated.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with all that. I think you're going to start to see more and more larger and medium-sized companies really start to use 3D printing in their factory space. And I'm not saying it's going to replace all of manufacturing, but in a lot of areas, it makes a lot of sense.
Gentlemen, this is unbelievable. Thanks to my guests, Aaron Walsh, John Cobb, Mick Ebeling, and Cody Wilson. Remember, you can find me on Twitter at Kingstings. He and I will see you next time.
All right.